My name is Milo Rivers, and I'm 43 years old. I've worn that age like a badge of modest success, but also like an anchor some days. Camille Rivers, my wife of 16 years, matches me in age, though her accomplishments often feel like they eclipse mine. She's sharp, polished, and adored at her firm, Andrus and Wren Designs. People light up when she walks into her room, like she's the key they've been waiting for to unlock their creativity. I've watched that happen dozens of times. Me? I own Haven-Built Cabinetry, a small business that's kept the lights on and even let us travel once in a while, but it's nothing flashy. Nothing that stops conversations. I've always thought of myself as the supporting cast in Camille's life, the guy with the quiet charm and the steady paycheck. And most days, that was enough. So when Camille mentioned the company's exclusive spring gala, this big, black tie event hosted by their president, Lawrence Dayton, I figured it was just another opportunity to do what I've always done, support her. Cheer her on from the sidelines. Let her shine. She said it was going to be held at the Franklin Hall downtown, the kind of place where the marble floors gleamed like they'd never known a footprint. I pictured myself in a suit I'd only worn twice, standing beside Camille in her sleek, tailored gown. She always looked stunning in formal wear, like she'd been born to glide through a crowd with a glass of wine and a polite smile. I'd just be her plus one. The tag-along. The guy with the easy grin and the folded hands. And that was fine. I liked being there for her. I liked seeing her glow. The morning of the gala, I woke up early, nerves buzzing like a low hum under my skin. Camille had already been up, her coffee half-drunk and her phone in her hand, scanning emails like a general surveying the battlefield. I watched her for a minute, admiring the way her hair fell across her cheek, the way her fingers moved fast and sure. She was in her element, even at 6:30 in the morning. She caught me staring and gave me a quick smile, more habit than warmth, and said, "Big night tonight. Don't be late." I nodded, even though I'd never been late to anything that mattered. I spent the day at the shop, finishing a custom walnut cabinet for a repeat client. The sawdust felt familiar, the weight of the wood in my hands a kind of comfort. At noon, I paused to imagine how the evening would go. I'd walk in with Camille, nod at her colleagues, laugh at jokes I didn't quite get, and clap politely when someone made a toast. I'd nurse a single glass of bourbon and keep my mouth shut. That was my job tonight. No hammers, no levels, just smiles and support. I was ready for that. At 6, I went home to change. Camille was already dressed, a deep emerald gown that hugged her curves and shimmered under the bedroom lights. She looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. I told her so, and she laughed, a quick, distracted sound as she turned to check her reflection again. I tried to smooth the lines of my suit, feeling suddenly underdressed even though I'd followed her advice to the letter. She leaned in, gave me a soft kiss on the cheek, and whispered, "Thank you for coming tonight, Milo. It means a lot." I nodded, my throat tight with something I couldn't name. The drive to the gala was quiet. Camille stared out the window, her phone in her lap but untouched. I tried to make small talk, about the cabinet project, about a new client asking for a built-in wine rack, but she only hummed in response, her mind already at the venue. I didn't take it personally. This was her night, and I was just along for the ride. I focused on the road, on the way the city lights blurred in the windshield. We arrived at Franklin Hall, and even from the curb, I could see it was the kind of place where people came to be seen. Spotlights lit the sidewalk, casting gold and white glows over the guests streaming in. Valets in pressed uniforms opened car doors with practiced grace. I stepped out and adjusted my jacket. Camille took my arm, her perfume warm and floral, and together we walked up the steps. She smiled at the doorman like she'd known him for years. He grinned back, tipping his cap, and suddenly I felt like the world was a stage she'd been born to own. Inside, it was exactly what I'd expected, polished marble floors that seemed to stretch forever, a ceiling that looked like a constellation of crystal. Waiters in black vests carried trays of drinks, weaving through clusters of men in sharp suits and women in designer dresses. A string quartet played softly near the bar, their music floating like a warm breeze. Camille's coworkers were already gathering, glasses raised, eyes bright. They spotted her and swooped in, all smiles and cheek kisses. I stood back, hands in my pockets, letting her shine. That's what I was here for, after all. Just a plus one. Just a tag along. But as I watched her laugh and talk, I wondered if she saw me at all. If she'd introduce me, or just let me fade into the background like a ghost. She caught my eye and waved me over, her smile bright but a little forced. I walked to her side, nodding politely as she made the rounds, but no one really looked at me. I was the husband, the cabinet guy, the plus one, the man who'd walk out of here at the end of the night, slip off his jacket, and wait for her to tell me how it all went. And that was fine. Really, it was. I'd built my life around supporting her, and I'd never wanted to take her place. But something in her eyes tonight felt different. Like she'd been waiting for this. Like she'd stepped into a world that didn't have room for me anymore. I tried to ignore it. I tried to focus on the music, the way the lights danced on the glasses, the scent of fresh flowers drifting through the air. I was just a plus one, right? Just a plus one. And for now, that was enough. Camille had been under pressure for weeks, more than I'd ever seen in the 16 years we'd been together. Every evening, she'd come home with that forced smile, her lips tight and her eyes dark like a storm behind glass. She'd kick off her heels, drop her purse by the door, and give me a mechanical kiss on the cheek, like a ritual we were both too tired to question. Andrus and Wren Designs was a prestigious firm with a reputation for being both cutthroat and innovative. They designed everything from luxury hotels to state-of-the-art workspaces, and Camille was their shining star. She'd been headhunted 2 years ago by the CEO himself, Lawrence Dayton, and she'd risen faster than any of us expected. But this year was different. They'd hired a new VP, Blair St. James. And I'd heard her name come up more often than I'd heard my own. Even in our own home, Blair St. James was a name that carried weight, even in the construction circles I moved in. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made every other conversation stop. Word had it she could kill a deal with a single glance, or make a career with one well-placed compliment. Camille idolized her in a way that made me uneasy. She'd talk about Blair the way some people talk about celebrities, her voice filled with admiration and a trace of fear. "She's brilliant, Milo," she'd say as she scrolled through her phone at night, half listening as I talked about a new cabinet design I'd sketched that day. She knows what it takes. I'd nod and pretend to understand, even though I couldn't remember the last time Camille had called me brilliant. As we drove to the venue that evening, the silence in the car felt heavy enough to buckle the doors. I glanced at Camille, hoping to catch her eyes, but she was staring straight ahead, fingers tapping a restless rhythm on her clutch. The streetlights slid across her face like spotlights on a stage, highlighting the tension in her jaw, the shallow rise and fall of her breath. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but I knew better. Camille wasn't the type to talk about feelings before an event like this. She needed to stay composed, to hold that mask of perfection in place for just a few more hours. We pulled into the Franklin Hall valet line, and Camille gave the attendant a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. He opened her door like she was royalty, and she stepped out, adjusting the strap of her emerald dress with a practiced grace. I climbed out on my side and joined her, offering my arm. She hesitated a split second before taking it. That pause felt like a crack in the foundation of the house we'd built together. But maybe I was imagining things. The venue itself was a marvel of architecture, marble floors polished to a mirror's shine, a vaulted ceiling that seemed to disappear into shadows lit by elegant chandeliers. A string quartet played something soft and expensive sounding near the entrance, and the smell of lavender and citrus drifted from hidden arrangements tucked between white linen tablecloths. People in tuxedos and designer gowns milled about, glasses of sparkling wine in hand, their laughter echoing off the stone columns. I tried not to stare at the wealth on display, but it was hard not to feel out of place. Camille's co-workers descended on her the moment we stepped through the door. Glossy smiles, air kisses, perfectly rehearsed greetings that reminded me of scripted lines in a play. They all looked the same, slim, manicured, eyes bright with ambition and something sharper lurking underneath. They said all the right words to her. "You look amazing, Cam." Blair's so impressed with the March project, Dayton can't stop talking about your design concepts. But when their eyes flicked to me, it was like I was invisible. Or worse, like I was a prop she'd brought along to complete the picture of her perfect life. Camille's fingers tightened on my arm just once, like a reminder that I needed to be on my best behavior. I nodded, offering polite smiles and murmured greetings, but I felt like a ghost. They didn't ask me what I did or how I was. They didn't ask anything. I was the plus one, the accessory, the man behind the woman. I spotted Blair St. James near the bar, holding court with a small cluster of people who leaned in like sunflowers to her son. She was as striking as Camille had described, tall, with a cascade of silver hair that looked deliberate, her makeup flawless, her posture straight and commanding. She turned her head slightly, catching sight of Camille, and a slow smile spread across her face. It wasn't warm. It wasn't even polite. It was the kind of smile that said, "I see you. Now prove you're worth seeing." Camille's breath caught, just for a second. Then she pulled her shoulders back and led me over to the table with her coworkers, like a general leading a parade. The table was long, draped in white linen, and set with gold-rimmed glasses and tiny name cards in elegant script. I scanned the row of cards, expecting to see my name. Milo Rivers, husband of Camille, polite +1. Instead, I froze. There, in a perfect, flowing gold script, was a card that read, "Idiot Trash." I stared at it. For a full 5 seconds, my brain refused to compute. Idiot trash? My fingers curled around the edge of the chair as laughter sparked around me. Soft at first, then louder, like a wave of broken glass. Camille let out a nervous chuckle, her eyes darting toward Blair. And Blair was smiling, lips pressed together in a smirk that said everything. A coworker across the table, a young man with a perfect haircut, snapped a quick photo and held up his phone. "That's classic," he said, his voice dripping with delight. My face felt hot. My ears rang. I'd known these people for maybe 20 minutes, but I felt like I'd known them forever. The way they looked at me, like I was a bug under glass, something to be poked and prodded for their amusement. Camille reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I just lowered myself into the chair, placed my hands calmly in my lap, and forced a smile. It felt like glass on my tongue. This was supposed to be her world, her night, her people. I was just the +1, right? Just the +1. But in that moment, I realized I was so much more than that. And they just reminded me of exactly who I didn't want to be. It was supposed to be a dinner party, not a public execution. But that's exactly what it felt like when I stared at the name card in front of me. Idiot Trash, written in fancy gold script like it was an inside joke I'd somehow agreed to be part of. I blinked once, then twice, hoping the letters might rearrange themselves into something else, anything else. But they stayed there, crisp and defiant, reflecting the soft glow of the table's centerpiece candles. My stomach twisted. I'd always known Camille's coworkers saw me as a sideshow act, a harmless cabinet maker tagging along for the free food, but I hadn't expected to be branded. Around me, the laughter spread like a virus. Soft giggles first, then sharper, more pointed laughter, the kind that scrapes along your spine and makes your ears burn. I could feel the heat rising in my face, the tightness in my chest that comes when humiliation crawls up your throat and threatens to choke you. Camille was no help. She chuckled nervously, glancing at Blair as if seeking approval or permission. Blair raised her glass in a slow, deliberate gesture, her eyes locked on mine, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth like a cat toying with a half-dead mouse. One coworker, a guy with slicked-back hair and a too-tight vest, snapped a picture on his phone. I could see the glow of the screen, the way he lined up the shot like it was a prize. "Oh, man," he said, grinning at his screen. "This is going on the group chat for sure." Another woman leaned over, trying not to laugh too loudly, but failing miserably. "This is so Blair," she whispered to her friend. "She always knows how to make a statement." My fingers dug into the linen napkin on my lap, and for a second, I thought I might tear it in half. But instead, I forced my lips into a smile. It felt like lifting 1,000 pounds with one finger. My eyes moved slowly across the table, catching the expressions of the people who were supposed to be Camille's team. Their eyes danced with delight, anticipation, a hunger for spectacle. I was the entertainment for the night, and they'd paid for front-row seats. Camille shifted beside me, her voice a thin thread of forced calm. "It's just a joke, Milo," she said, leaning in, her perfume too strong and suddenly cloying. "Don't overreact. Blair has a quirky sense of humor, that's all." But her eyes, God, her eyes told me everything. They darted around, checking the faces at the table, scanning for judgment. She wasn't defending me. She was making sure I didn't ruin her night. Blair's voice cut through the air like a blade. "We're creatives, Milo. We go for irony. You know, subverting expectations." Her words dripped with condescension, each syllable a carefully placed dagger. I wanted to stand up, to flip the table and tell them all exactly what I thought of their brand of irony, but something in me refused to give them that satisfaction. I'd spent my whole life building things, shelves, cabinets, intricate pieces that fit together seamlessly. I wasn't about to let a room full of corporate sharks tear me apart with a single joke. I took a breath, one slow, measured breath that steadied the fire in my chest. Then I did the one thing they didn't expect. I pulled out the chair, sat down, folded my hands neatly on the table, and smiled. A real smile, not the fake one I'd been practicing all evening. A smile that said, I see you. I see all of you. And you can't break me. For a moment, the laughter stumbled. Blair's smirk faltered just a hair. Camille's eyes widened in surprise. The guy with the phone lowered it, his grin slipping. The spell was broken, even if just for a second. I held their gaze, refusing to let my expression crack. Inside, I was screaming at the absurdity, the cruelty, the betrayal of the woman I'd promised to love and cherish. But on the outside, I was stone. The waiter came by with the wine, oblivious to the tension that vibrated in the air like a live wire. He poured a glass for me, his hand steady, his face neutral. I took it, raised it slightly, and clinked glasses with Camille. She tried to smile, but it crumbled at the edges. She knew. She knew exactly what this was, a test of loyalty. And I could see in her eyes that she'd failed it before she'd even tried. I took a sip of the wine, letting the taste roll across my tongue. It was bitter, sharp, expensive. I set the glass down carefully, aligning it perfectly with the edge of my name card. So, I said, my voice calm measured. What's on the menu tonight? Other than me, of course. A ripple of laughter moved around the table, but it was different this time, uneasy, uncertain. Blair's eyes narrowed just a touch. She didn't like that I'd spoken. She didn't like that I wasn't playing my part. Camille leaned over, her hand brushing mine like a question mark. Please, Milo, she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't do this. Not here. Not tonight. Her fingers were cold against my skin, and I wanted to pull away, but I didn't. Instead, I turned to her and met her eyes, steady and unflinching. Don't do what, Cam? I asked, my voice low but clear enough for the table to hear. Don't embarrass you? Or don't embarrass them? Her eyes darted away, and I knew the answer. Blair cleared her throat. Let's move on, shall we? She said, her tone crisp, commanding. No need to dwell on a little harmless fun. We're all professionals here. She picked up her fork and began to eat, as if nothing had happened. The rest of the table followed her lead, plates clinking, conversations resuming. But I could feel the tension like a second skin. I sat there, the name card in front of me like a brand. Idiot trash. It was supposed to be funny, but to me it was a declaration, a line in the sand. And I knew right then and there that I was done playing the plus one. I was done letting them treat me like I was less than the man I built myself to be. I might have come here to support Camille, to smile and clap and play the part. But this was something else. I sat back, watching them, each face a mask, each laugh a dagger. And in that moment, I decided something important. I wouldn't let them define me. I wouldn't let them take my dignity. They might think I was idiot trash, but they were about to find out exactly what that meant. Camille leaned toward me, her breath a mixture of wine and nerves. Her whisper was urgent, like a parent scolding a child in church. They're just kidding, babe. Don't overreact. Her hand fluttered to my forearm, cold and trembling. Her eyes darted around the table, scanning faces, making sure no one noticed her shame at my discomfort. But I noticed. I saw every flicker of her eyelids, every quiver of her lips, every shift in her posture, as if she were ready to shrink under the table. I stared at her, that mask of composure slipping for the first time since we'd left the house. She didn't say, I'm sorry. She didn't say, that was cruel. Instead, she told me not to make it about me, as if my name on that card hadn't been the opening act for the evening's entertainment. As if I was supposed to laugh along and then vanish, a supporting character in a play that starred everyone but me. Across the table, Blair was swirling her wine like a priest offering communion. Her eyes found mine and held them, as if testing my limits. We're creatives, Milo. We go for irony. Her smile was thin, cutting, the kind that slices deeper because it's framed by perfect lipstick and an audience. It's all in good fun. You can take a joke, right? The rest of the table tittered, heads bobbing, eyes flickering back and forth like they'd been trained to do. A polite, practiced laugh. I forced a smile that felt foreign on my face, a gesture that tasted like vinegar. Of course, I said, my voice calm but colder than the ice melting in my untouched glass. I've always been good at taking a joke. The lie settled in my chest like a stone, because I wasn't laughing. I wasn't even amused. I was hurt, and I was angry. But I'd spent a lifetime learning how to hide that, how to tuck it away behind polite smiles and deferential nods. I'd learned to accept that I was always the plus one, the extra, the guy who showed up to clap politely and then fade into the background. I'd thought that was enough. But tonight, it felt like a prison sentence. I leaned back, letting the candlelight flicker in my glass. Blair raised her eyebrows, waiting for me to explode, to make a scene that would justify their label. I could almost hear the script in her head. Oh, he overreacted. He couldn't handle a joke. The same script Camille was reading from when she told me not to make it about me. But I wasn't about to play the fool for them. Not tonight. So I laughed, low and measured. I get it, I said, letting the words roll slowly, like smoke. It's a branding thing. Andrus and Ren loves its irony. I picked up the name card, turning it between my fingers like a delicate piece of evidence. Very on brand. Blair's smirk deepened, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of control. Exactly, she said, her voice dripping with satisfaction. We're all family here, Milo. You understand. Family. The word made my skin crawl. Families protect each other. They lift each other up. They don't label someone idiot trash and laugh about it over dinner. But I bit my tongue and let the silence stretch. I watched Camille's eyes dart around the table, gauging reactions, gauging me. Her fingers drummed an uneven rhythm on the tablecloth, her bracelet clinking like a tiny warning bell. Of course, I said again, softer this time, as if I were agreeing to something unspoken. My gaze drifted to the silverware, polished to a mirror finish, and then back to Blair. You know, it's funny, I continued, my voice casual but edged with something sharper. I've been supplying your firm with custom cabinetry for 6 years. I've built your conference rooms, your kitchen break rooms, your executive offices. Hell, I even installed that glass feature wall in your lobby last year. But I guess the real brand is, I flicked the name card with my finger. This. A hush fell over the table. Even Blair's smirk wavered for a fraction of a second. I saw it. I felt it. The ripple of unease that always comes when the target stands up, even if just with words. Camille's lips parted, her face pale. She reached for me, but I leaned away. I wasn't about to let her touch me, not after she'd let this happen. Blair recovered quickly, her laugh ringing out, too loud, too rehearsed. Well, she said, raising her glass like a queen in a castle. We appreciate your craftsmanship, Milo. Truly. Let's toast to that. Her eyes met mine, daring me to challenge her. I raised my glass, but I didn't toast. I set it down slowly, deliberately. I looked at Blair, then at Camille, then at each person at that table who had laughed at me. I think, I said, my voice steady, I'm done being the plus one. Camille's face crumbled, her eyes wide. Milo, please, she whispered. But it was too late. I decided. My heart was pounding so hard I thought the whole table could hear it. But I didn't let it show. I stood, smoothing the front of my jacket. Excuse me, I said, my tone formal, cold. I need some air. I turned, ignoring Camille's outstretched hand, ignoring the hush that had fallen. Blair called after me, don't be so sensitive, Milo. It's just a joke. I didn't turn back. I kept walking, each step carrying me away from the table, away from the laughter, away from the lie I'd been living. I was done playing their game, done pretending I was okay with being the man behind the woman who couldn't, or wouldn't, defend him. I reached the hallway, the cool marble walls a welcome contrast to the suffocating heat of that table. I stopped, my breath ragged but controlled. My reflection in the glass door was pale, my eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. Behind me, I could hear the muffled laughter resuming. The dinner would go on. The wine would flow. But I wouldn't be part of it. Not anymore. I'd spent too long letting them brand me with their labels, letting them treat me like a sideshow. But tonight, I decided to walk away from all of it. The dinner, the disrespect, and the company my business had been quietly supplying for the last 6 years. Maybe they'd learn. Maybe they wouldn't. But that was their problem now. I was done being idiot trash. I was done being their joke. And in that quiet hallway, with the laughter fading behind me, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Midway through dessert, a delicate construction of chocolate mousse and edible gold leaf that cost more than I earned in a day, I stood up. My chair scraped against the marble floor, the sound sharp enough to slice through the murmur of polite conversation. Camille's hand shot out, her fingers catching my sleeve in a silent plea. Milo, please sit, she whispered, her voice tight, a tremor in her eyes that felt like a threat and a cry for help all at once. I met her gaze, saw the panic in her pupils, and knew she was thinking about the damage I might cause. damage to her image, to her carefully cultivated place in this kingdom of power suits and Art Deco chandeliers. I gently pulled my sleeve from her grasp, feeling her fingers slip away like water. "I'm just stepping out," I said, my voice calm, controlled, each word a quiet rebellion. I smoothed my jacket as I turned, scanning the room until my eyes landed on the bar-polished mahogany, manned by a single bartender in a crisp white shirt. And there, in conversation with a regional partner, stood Lawrence Dayton himself, the president of Andrus and Wren Designs. His presence radiated authority even in the sea of tailored suits and curated smiles. He wore his success like a custom-made armor, each button gleaming with a kind of effortless confidence. I'd only met him twice before, both times during installations my company had done at their flagship office. He'd been polite, gracious even, praising my craftsmanship and talking about how Haven-Built's work had saved them money and elevated their brand. But tonight, he was just another face in a crowd until now. I walked straight toward him, my steps even, my heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. Each step felt like it carried 1,000 unsaid words, every slight, every patronizing laugh, every dismissive glance I'd absorbed over the years. Camille's voice called faintly behind me, but I didn't look back. This was between me and the people who thought they could brand me idiot trash and still get the best of my work. Lawrence turned as I approached, his eyes lighting up with polite recognition. "Milo Rivers," he said, extending a hand like a man who just remembered an important connection. "Of course, Haven-Built Cabinetry. Your custom installations saved our Grace and Property budget last quarter. That was brilliant work." His words rang with the kind of practice praise that came naturally to men like him, an appreciation for a job well done, nothing more, nothing less. But for the first time, I didn't shrink under it. I took his hand and shook it firmly, feeling the strength in his grip and knowing I wasn't the only one with something to lose. "Thank you," I said, letting my voice stay calm, even. "Your team's always been good to work with, at least, they were until tonight." His smile faltered. "I'm sorry, tonight? What's wrong?" I held up my phone, screen aglow with the photo I'd taken earlier at the table. The name card in its perfect, elegant script. "Idiot trash." The letters glared at us, a condemnation in gold foil. Lawrence's eyes darted from the screen to me, confusion flickering across his face. "Ask your VP and her team," I said, my voice low but steady, the words sharper than any blade I'd ever held. "Ask them why they thought it was funny to put this at my place setting. Ask them why they laughed." He stared at the photo, his brow furrowing. I saw the gears turning, the weight of responsibility shifting as he realized this wasn't just a joke gone wrong. This was a potential scandal, an embarrassment that could tarnish the company's reputation. "Mr. Rivers," he began, his voice now edged with concern. I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. Let's sit down, we can talk." I shook my head. "I'm not here to talk it through. I came here tonight to support my wife, to celebrate her achievements. But instead, I was humiliated at her table, by her team, and by extension, your company." His mouth opened, but I didn't give him a chance to respond. I leaned in just slightly, my voice low enough that only he could hear, but firm enough that he'd never forget it. "I'm cutting ties with Andrus and Wren. Effective tonight." His eyes widened, his face paling under the soft glow of the bar lights. "Wait, Milo, let's not be hasty. Your craftsmanship, your team." "My team will be fine," I said, my voice final. "We have other contracts, and now, we'll have more time to focus on clients who respect what we do, and who we are." He blinked, his jaw tightening, his hand dropping to his side. "I'm sorry," he murmured, but the words felt like they were spoken by someone far away. "I didn't know. That's the problem," I said, my tone measured. "You didn't know, and now you do." I stepped back, my heart hammering, but my spine straight. I felt a lightness in my chest, a freedom that came with finally standing up, finally choosing myself over the shadows I'd been living in. As I turned to leave, I saw Blair across the room, her laughter frozen on her lips, her glass halfway to her mouth. Her eyes locked on me, confusion and annoyance warring for control. Camille was beside her, pale and trembling, her eyes wide with disbelief. I didn't stop to talk to either of them. I walked out of that room with my head held high, each step carrying me away from the person they'd tried to define me as, away from the plus one who'd stayed silent for too long. Outside, the night air was crisp and cool, a relief after the stifling warmth of that ballroom. I took a deep breath, the city lights twinkling like distant stars, and felt something in me settle, something that had been rattling loose for years. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking towards something better. I didn't know what it would look like yet, but I knew this. It would have my name on it. No gold foil. No mockery. Just mine. And I was okay with that. Lawrence Dayton blinked, his face a shifting canvas of confusion, disbelief, and something that looked like shock. The kind of look you'd expect from a man whose house had just been broken into, but the thief wasn't there for the silver. No, the thief had come for the truth. "Excuse me," he asked, his voice softer now, almost brittle. A man used to being in charge, caught off guard by someone he'd thought too small to matter. I didn't waver. My hands were steady at my sides, my phone still glowing in my pocket like a smoking gun. I looked him dead in the eye, holding his gaze so he couldn't look away. "Ask your VP and her team," I said, letting every syllable land with the weight of a hammer. "Ask them why my place card read, idiot trash." I felt the words settle in the air, sharp and undeniable, the way the truth always does. His face tensed like he'd just been slapped. I pulled the phone from my pocket, the screen lit with the photo I'd snapped. My name card in gold script, that hateful label mocking me from the linen tablecloth. I didn't have to say a word as I handed it to him. His eyes darted from the photo to me, then to the bustling gala behind us where Blair was holding court, her laughter ringing like a bell over the polished marble. He exhaled, a sound somewhere between disbelief and anger. This is unacceptable," he muttered, but his voice lacked the conviction of a man who'd built his empire on polished smiles and sealed deals. I straightened my back, feeling taller than I'd felt in years. "I respect my wife," I said, the words rolling out of me like a vow I'd been waiting to make. "I came in peace. But now, I leave with pride." I let that sink in, let him feel the finality of it. I wasn't asking for an apology. I wasn't begging for respect. I was taking it. Behind me, the noise from the dining hall continued like a distant party I was no longer part of. Plates clinked, laughter rose and fell, and somewhere, a violin played a piece I couldn't name. But it all felt muted, like I'd stepped through a door into a different world, one where I didn't have to prove my worth to anyone. Dayton's fingers curled around the phone, his thumb brushing the screen as if he could erase the image by smudging it. "Milo," he said, his voice softer now, a note of desperation threading through his tone. "You have to understand, this isn't who we are. We value every vendor, every partner." "Save it," I interrupted, my voice calm but carrying a firmness that surprised even me. "I've been quietly supplying your company for 6 years. My team has worked nights, weekends, and holidays to deliver the best. We've taken pride in every project. And this is what I get in return." I let the silence stretch, let the guilt settle like dust in the air. He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance to spin another polished corporate apology. "I'm not asking for an explanation," I continued. "I'm telling you that your company's name no longer deserves the work I do. I'm cutting ties. Effective tonight." For a second, the mask of the president slipped, and I saw the man underneath, the one who'd built his reputation on deals and handshakes, but maybe hadn't looked too closely at the details. The one who'd let people like Blair thrive because she got results, because she made the company look good, on paper, at least. His jaw tightened, and he nodded once, slow and deliberate. "You're right," he said finally, the words heavy, each one a confession. "You deserve better than this." I nodded, the finality of it washing over me like a cold rain. "Yeah," I said, my voice low but steady. "I do." And then I turned, letting the moment hang like a painting on a wall, and started walking away. Each step felt like a victory, a declaration that I wouldn't be defined by their laughter or their labels. That I was more than a +1, more than the man who showed up to clap politely and then fade into the background. Behind me, I heard Dayton's voice, louder now, sharp as a command. "Blair," he barked. "In my office. Now." His tone was laced with anger and something else, fear, maybe, or the realization that the empire he'd built might have cracks in its foundation. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The hallway was empty, the carpet muffling my footsteps as I made my way toward the exit. I could feel the eyes on me, curious glances from strangers, staff members pausing mid-step, wondering what story they'd just walked into. But I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't playing a part. I was just Milo Rivers, a man who refused to let someone else's label define him. I reached the door and pushed it open, the night air cool and sharp against my face. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the evening lift off my shoulders like a burden I'd carried for far too long. I glanced back once, just long enough to see the chaos I'd left in my wake, Dayton striding across the floor, his face set in a hard line, Blair staring after him with wide, uncertain eyes, Camille standing by the table, her hands pressed to her mouth like she'd just witnessed something unthinkable. And maybe she had. Maybe, for the first time, she'd seen the man she'd married. Not the plus one, not the cabinet guy, but the man who'd build his own life, brick by brick, and who wouldn't let anyone, especially her, take that from him. I turned away, stepping into the night, my mind already turning toward tomorrow, toward the work waiting for me, the team that believed in me, the clients who respected me, and maybe, just maybe, toward a life that felt more like my own. I didn't know exactly what came next, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the unknown. Because I'd remembered something important. I was the builder. And no one, no VP, no boss, no dinner table full of fake smiles, could take that away from me. Camille came home hours later. I heard the click of her keys in the door, the familiar rustle of her heels on the tile, the small sigh she always let out when she crossed the threshold of our house, as though home were a costume she could slip off at will. Only tonight, there was no relief in her sigh. It sounded different, strained, almost broken. She stepped into the living room, her eyes scanning the shadows for me. She found me sitting on the sofa, a glass of water in my hand, the TV screen black. I'd left it that way on purpose, a silent room, a place where her excuses would echo without interruption. Her eyes were red, but she tried to hide it by turning away and setting her purse on the entry table. "Why would you embarrass me like that?" she said finally, her voice trembling with anger and something else, fear, maybe, or shame. She turned back to me, arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if she were holding herself together. "You don't understand how that world works." I stared at her, the woman I loved, the woman who'd once laughed at my jokes and stayed up with me sketching ideas for the custom cabinetry business we'd built from scratch. But tonight, I saw something different in her eyes, a glimmer of resentment, a thin film of panic. "That world," I repeated, the words like pebbles on my tongue. "The world where your boss thinks it's funny to call your husband idiot trash? The world where you sit there and let them laugh at me like I'm not even a human being? That world." I let the silence hang heavy between us. She flinched, her arms tightening. "It was just a joke," she said, her voice too high, too brittle. "You know, Blair, she's always had that sense of humor. It's her way of..." "Of what?" I cut in, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "Of humiliating people who don't fit her idea of creative? Of reminding everyone at that table that they're better than me?" I set the glass down on the coffee table with a quiet clink, the sound more final than a slammed door. "You laughed, Camille. You laughed with them. And then you told me not to make it about me." She swallowed, her eyes glistening. "I didn't mean to." "But you did," I said, my tone softer now but no less firm. "You chose them. You chose to sit there and let them define me. And that's the part one can't just swallow down like it didn't happen." She sat down across from me, her posture rigid, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. "You don't understand," she said, her voice a hoarse whisper. "You don't know what it's like in that office. Every day is a test. Blair, she's ruthless. One wrong move, and you're out. You have no idea how hard I've worked to get where I am." I leaned forward, my elbows on my knees, my eyes locked on hers. "Then maybe I don't belong in your world anymore," I said, each word a quiet detonation in the space between us. Her breath caught, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She blinked hard, pressing her lips together until they were a thin, colorless line. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice flat. "You're just going to walk away?" I took a slow, steady breath. "No, Camille," I said. "You're the one who walked away. Maybe not with your feet, but with your silence, with your laughter, with your refusal to stand up for me." I stood then, the motion slow but deliberate, like a man reclaiming his place in the world. "I'm done pretending that my place is behind you, waiting for you to remember I exist." Her eyes filled, but she didn't move. "Milo," she whispered, but the word felt empty, like a name she'd borrowed from someone else's story. I turned and headed toward the kitchen, needing distance, needing space to breathe. I could feel her eyes on my back, heavy with things unsaid. But I didn't turn around. I didn't give her the comfort of my attention, not this time. The house was too quiet, the clock on the wall ticking like a slow metronome, each second stretching into an eternity. I gripped the edge of the counter, letting the cold granite ground me. I thought about the years we'd spent building a life together, the late nights, the shared dreams, the whispered promises. But I also thought about every time I'd put her needs ahead of mine, every time I'd been the plus one, the silent supporter, the easy laugh in a sea of cold smiles. She'd let them call me idiot trash, and she'd laughed. I turned back to face her, my eyes steady, my heart suddenly calm. I loved you, I said, my voice low. I loved the woman you used to be, the one who celebrated my victories, who held my hand when things got hard. I don't know where she went, Camille. I don't know if she's ever coming back. But I can't stay here waiting for her. Her lips trembled, her eyes brimming with tears. But she didn't speak. And maybe that was her answer. I walked past her then, to the living room, my footsteps quiet but sure. I felt a weight lift from my chest with every step, like I was finally shedding the part of me that had let her world define mine. Outside, the night air was crisp and full of possibility. I paused on the porch, taking in the stars above, the hush of the wind. I wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, what conversations we'd have, what battles we'd fight, but I knew this. I wouldn't be the man who let a single table of suits and a woman too afraid to defend him decide his worth. Her silence was sharper than any insult. But deep down, I think she knew I was right. And in that knowing, in that quiet acknowledgement, I felt something shift. Something that felt like freedom. Something that felt like me. 2 days later, the morning sun streamed through the kitchen window like a quiet accusation. I stood at the counter, coffee in hand, staring at the same stainless steel sink I'd installed years ago with a sense of pride. That sink had felt like a milestone then, a symbol that we'd made it, that my craft could hold its own in a home like ours. Now, it felt like a relic of a life that didn't quite fit anymore. I took a slow sip, letting the bitterness ground me. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I set the cup down and moved to the front door, half expecting Camille to be waiting with another round of apologies or explanations. But instead, a courier in a navy jacket stood on the porch, a small box in his hands. "Mr. Rivers?" he asked, checking the label before passing it over. "That's me," I replied, taking the package. His eyes darted to the name on the label, Haven-Built Cabinetry, and he gave me a quick nod before retreating to his van. I closed the door slowly, the box heavier in my hands than it should have been. I carried it to the kitchen table, running my thumb along the tape, feeling the tension gather in my chest. Camille wasn't home yet. She'd left early for the office, promising a quick meeting that probably meant another round of damage control. I opened the box carefully, the flaps peeling back to reveal a stack of letters neatly arranged, each one on the same creamy Andrus and Wren letterhead that had once represented opportunity and pride. The first was from Lawrence Dayton himself. I unfolded it, the paper stiff and formal. His words were measured, heavy with corporate regret, but too carefully phrased to be personal. "Dear Mr. Rivers, I am deeply sorry for the incident at the gala. What occurred was not representative of our values or our respect for the craftsmanship you and your company have provided over the years. Please accept my sincere apologies. We have initiated an internal review to ensure such behavior is not repeated." I let the letter drop to the table. I'd expected it, some gesture from the top, designed to smooth ruffled feathers and protect the brand. But as I reached for the next envelope, my hands paused, the weight of the moment settling on my shoulders. This one was handwritten, the ink smudged in places, the handwriting rushed but sincere. "Dear Milo, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Blair would go that far. I always admired the work you did for us, and the way you supported Camille. I recorded Blair that night, bragging about the prank. I couldn't let it stand. I've already sent the recording to Dayton. I hope it helps. Sierra." I read the letter twice, my heart pounding. Sierra, Camille's colleague. I remembered her, quiet, competent, always polite to me at events. She'd been at the table that night, her eyes downcast as Blair's laughter rang in my ears. And now she'd taken a risk to show me that not everyone at that firm had bought into Blair's brand of cruelty. A third letter sat at the bottom of the stack. No signature, just a typed resignation. Blair St. James. The woman who'd turned a dinner table into a coliseum. Her words were cold, formal, a lifeline made of stone. Effective immediately, I resigned my position at Andrus and Wren Designs. I regret any actions that may have caused harm to the company or its partners. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just the finality of a signature at the bottom. I let the letters fall into a neat pile and leaned back in my chair. The kitchen felt too quiet, too bright, like the world had moved on without me. Camille would come home eventually, and she'd find the box. She'd read the letters and understand, maybe for the first time, what her silence had cost. A knock at the door startled me from my thoughts. I stood, moving to the hallway, and opened it to find a delivery man standing there, this time with a stack of folders marked Proposal. He handed them to me, his expression professional but polite. Mr. Rivers? These are from some of the companies that reached out after the gala. I thanked him and brought the stack inside, setting it next to the letters. I thumbed through the folders, each one carrying the logo of a competitor. Design firms, construction companies, boutique architecture studios. Some I'd heard of, others were new. All of them wanted to work with me. They wanted Havenbuilt's name on their projects. A small laugh escaped me, dry, but real. I'd walked away from Andrus and Wren thinking I might lose everything. Instead, I'd opened a door to something new, something better. My phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up, reading the latest email from a potential client. Mr. Rivers, we heard about what happened at Andrus and Wren. We'd love to discuss a partnership with Havenbuilt. Your craftsmanship and integrity are exactly what we're looking for. Integrity, a word that felt like home in my mouth. The front door opened quietly, and Camille's heels clicked on the wood floor. I turned as she entered the kitchen, her eyes puffy, her hair pulled back too tightly. She saw the box, the letters, the stack of folders, and her face paled. Milo, she started, but I held up a hand, gentle but firm. Read them, I said. Read them all. She sat at the table, picking up each letter with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the words. Her lips parted as she read Sierra's note, her face crumpling at the resignation letter. When she reached the proposals, she looked up at me, tears brimming. I didn't know they'd do this, she whispered. You thought it was a joke, I said, my voice calm. A joke that cost them 3 employees and a reputation. I gestured to the stack of proposals. And it cost you your place there, too. Her eyes widened. They put me on leave, she confessed, her voice shaking. Pending an investigation. I nodded. Because you didn't stand up. Because you let them think that kind of behavior was okay. She wiped at her eyes, her hands trembling. I didn't think it would go that far. You didn't think. I interrupted, not unkindly but firmly. You didn't think about me, about us. You let them decide what mattered. The silence stretched between us like a bridge we weren't sure how to cross. But in that moment, I felt something like forgiveness. Not for her, maybe not yet, but for myself. For letting it get this far. For thinking that being the +1 was all I was meant to be. I stood, gathering the letters and the proposals, stacking them neatly. I have work to do, I said, and a team that believes in me. She nodded, her tears falling freely now. I didn't reach for her. Not yet. Outside, the sun was high, the day full of possibility. My company, my name, was stronger than ever. And as I headed to the workshop, I knew I wasn't the man who'd been branded at that table anymore. I was the man who'd walked away and built something better. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't the kind of silence that followed a fight. It was heavier. Still, like the air was holding its breath, waiting for something to shift. Camille sat across from me at the dinner table, where we used to share quick laughs and clink wine glasses over takeout cartons and long days. But tonight, there were no glasses. No food. Just her and me and the weight of what we hadn't said. She pushed her plate aside, it was barely touched, and stared at her hands. She wasn't wearing makeup tonight. No earrings. Just a simple black sweater and jeans. Stripped of the designer polish, she looked younger. Smaller. Like the version of her I remembered from years ago, when we still talked about dreams without worrying if they fit into someone else's plan. She took a deep breath and looked at me. I don't know who I am outside that job, she said, her voice trembling as though she'd never said the words out loud before. I always thought, if I climbed far enough, stayed late enough, impressed the right people, Blair, Lawrence, that everything would finally make sense, that I'd matter. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't rehearsing a pitch or reciting some preloaded defense. She was just Camille, lost, hurt, and finally honest. She looked down again. I spent years proving I belonged in that firm. And somewhere along the way, I stopped defending the parts of me that actually did. Her fingers picked at the seam of the tablecloth. Like you. Us. I swallowed hard. There it was. It wasn't bitterness I felt, though I'd be lying if I said it didn't flash through me sometimes. It wasn't even anger anymore. What I felt was more complicated. A grief, almost, for the version of us that used to be strong, playful, imperfect, but real. The us that sat on this same table 6 years ago planning the Havenbuilt expansion, mapping out a life where my craftsmanship and her vision could build something together. We used to have a rhythm, and then that rhythm started to skip. Slowly, at first. Then it fractured completely. You didn't lose yourself, Cam, I said, choosing each word with care. You just stopped defending the parts of you that mattered. Her eyes met mine, full of something raw and vulnerable. I didn't know how to stop it, she whispered. Everything moved so fast. Blair gave me attention. Opportunities. I kept thinking, if I just stayed on her good side, if I just kept performing, maybe she'd make space for me. I didn't realize I was becoming her. I looked down at the wood grain beneath my hand. I'd carved this table, sanded every corner, sealed every groove. My hands had shaped it over weeks, and now it held this moment like a confession booth. You stood by her while she humiliated me, I said, softly but without apology. That wasn't about business, Cam. That was about basic respect. I know. Her voice cracked. I know. And it's killing me. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. She didn't sob. Camille never cried loudly. Even her breakdowns were quiet, like she was afraid to burden the world with her grief. She wiped at her face with the sleeve of her sweater, but the tears kept coming. I kept telling myself it wasn't a big deal. That you'd brush it off. That you always do, she said, her voice quivering. But when you walked away, when you told Dayton you were cutting ties, I saw it, Milo. I saw who you were. Who I stopped seeing a long time ago. I didn't say anything right away. I wanted to. God, I had so much I could say. But I knew the difference between words that filled silence and words that changed something. So I waited. I forgot, she said, almost to herself, how much strength it takes to stay kind. You've always carried things I never even noticed. You let me take the spotlight while you handled the weight. And I let them laugh at you like you were disposable. I finally spoke. You didn't just let them laugh, Cam. You laughed too. That one hurt her. She winced, her face folding in on itself like a collapsed structure. I was scared, she admitted. I was scared that if I said something, I'd be next. That Blair would turn on me. That I'd lose the life I worked for. You lost it anyway, I said gently. Not to wound her, but because it was true. She nodded, slowly. I know. The room went quiet again, but it wasn't sharp this time. It felt like the silence of something being rebuilt, painfully, slowly. Like we were picking up the same blueprint, unsure of whether we wanted to reconstruct what we had or sketch something entirely different. I looked at her, really looked at her, not the woman from the gala, not the voice on the phone talking deadlines and drafts, but the woman I met all those years ago at that woodworking expo, the one who lingered too long at my booth because she liked the detail in a cherrywood drawer. She used to believe in detail, in effort. Somewhere along the way, she'd traded that for speed and power. But maybe, it wasn't too late to remember. I don't know what happens next, I said finally. I'm not making promises. Not yet. She nodded again, wiping at her cheeks. I'm not asking for them. I just wanted you to know I see it now. I see you. It wasn't an apology, not in the formal sense. But it was something more valuable, acknowledgement. And sometimes, the beginning of healing isn't in grand gestures, it's in being seen. Fully. Without excuse. We didn't talk about reconciliation that night. We didn't start mapping out how to put our marriage back together. That would come later, if at all. But what we did talk about was truth. About how we'd gotten here. About how we both let something beautiful become background noise. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without bitterness in my chest. The hurt was still there, but the bitterness had left. And in its place, there was room, maybe not for us just yet, but for clarity, for dignity, for peace. I never raised my voice. Not once. I didn't flip the table or throw the wine. I didn't give them the drama they expected. What I did was simple. I stood up, walked away from a table that no longer deserved me, and looked a company president in the eye as I told him, I'm cutting ties. That sentence wasn't just about business. It was about everything. Because I wasn't only walking away from a contract. I was walking away from years of being diminished in whispers and polished jokes. From the quiet neglect, the small sacrifices that had piled up like dust in the corners of a house we no longer cleaned together. I walked away from pretending that being the plus one made me less than whole. That night, I chose something else. I chose self-respect. And it was terrifying. It's funny how fast things change once you start saying no. My inbox, once filled with repeat work orders and mild pleasantries from Andrus and Wren's staff, now overflowed with introductions from competitors, proposals with clean budgets, Notes from people who had quietly admired my work from afar. The company that once mocked me as idiot trash had done more for my reputation by disrespecting me publicly than years of silent craftsmanship ever had. It was ironic, but also poetic. Camille, for her part, stayed quiet those first few days. Her leave of absence from work became indefinite. Her name, once said with admiration in industry circles, was now paired with the phrase, under review. We barely spoke beyond what was necessary, but there was no yelling. Just space, time, reflection. One afternoon, I found myself in the workshop, sanding the edge of a walnut slab, letting the vibration of the machine ease something restless in me. The shop had always been where I thought best. The grain of the wood, the scent of sawdust, it was my rhythm, my center. I paused, ran my hand over the polished edge, and felt the smoothness beneath my fingertips. Clean, honest. A piece of work that could stand on its own without explanation. That's who I wanted to be now. That's who I'd forgotten I already was. I kept thinking back to that moment, the second I saw the name card. Idiot trash. Written in gold cursive like it was a joke wrapped in elegance. But what hit harder than the words was the reaction. The laughter. The silence from the woman who promised to have my back. And the way I sat there, smiling, not because I was okay, but because I already knew I was leaving. Because sometimes walking away is louder than any protest. I didn't plan to become a symbol, but somehow I did. People from all walks started reaching out. A guy from a fabrication firm messaged me, saw what you did, been in your shoes. Respect. A woman who ran a competitor design firm wrote, there's dignity in restraint. Let's talk collaboration. That night at the gala had been their show, but how I walked away, that became mine. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was clarity. Camille came into the workshop a week later. She didn't knock, just stood in the doorway like she used to before she got too busy for things like this. I didn't look up immediately. I wanted to give her the space to decide what she had come to say. I saw the latest proposal, she said quietly, referring to the one from Maddox Designs, Andrus and Rin's fiercest rival. It's good. They're smart to come to you. I set the sander down and wiped my hands on a rag. They're respectful, I said. She nodded slowly, stepping further in. I used to be. The silence between us held, not sharp, not bitter, just honest. I know it doesn't fix anything, she said, but I wanted to say thank you for not making a scene, for showing grace when I didn't deserve it. I turned to her, really looking now. It wasn't grace, Cam, I said. It was choosing myself, something I should have done a long time ago. She nodded again, tears welling but not falling. I see that now, and I think she did. Not just the damage, but the quiet strength it took to stand without applause, to leave without slamming the door. Not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I'd finally remembered who I was before the laughter, before the compromise. The man who builds, who crafts, who holds his name with quiet pride. That night at the gala, I walked away from a table full of people who thought they could define me. But what they never understood was, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward something else. Toward dignity. Toward peace. Toward the version of myself who didn't need a spotlight to matter. And maybe, just maybe, toward a future that belonged entirely to me. I never raised my voice. I didn't break anything. That night, when I stood from that table and calmly walked away, it wasn't anger that drove me, it was clarity. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small or overlooked or second best. I felt grounded. And when I told Lawrence Dayton, I'm cutting ties, I wasn't just speaking to a company. I was speaking to everything that had made me feel like I didn't belong. Camille, the laughter, the name card, the hollow apologies, they were all noise. White noise I had trained myself to ignore for the sake of keeping peace, for the illusion of partnership, for love that had stopped looking like love. But that night, I made a choice I should have made years ago. I chose me. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making a scene or proving anything to them. It was about self-respect. A quiet, firm refusal to let anyone else narrate my worth. I had spent years standing just outside the circle, building things with my hands, while others build illusions with words. They mocked the simplicity of what I did because they didn't understand it. But they stood in buildings I designed, sat at tables I crafted, and toasted in rooms I built. They couldn't see the value in the hands that built their foundation, until those hands let go. And Camille, my wife, my partner, she saw it too late. Maybe that's the cruelest part. She saw who I was only when I walked away. But even then, I didn't scream or slam doors. I didn't write long speeches or post anything online. I just left. with my dignity intact. And it turns out that silence echoed louder than anything I could have shouted. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see the man who was laughed at or labeled. I see the man who walked away. The man who rebuilt himself, not in spite of the insult, but because of it. And as I lay my tools down at the end of the day, sawdust in my palms and purpose in my chest, I know exactly what that moment was. It was the moment I chose peace over pride. It was the moment I remembered who I was. And that, I've learned, is what real love, real dignity, actually looks like. Even if it means starting again.